Hello, everyone. Welcome to week two. First off, I appreciate I appreciate your attention to our discussion in week one and getting to know each other and being vulnerable with each other. That's really important for this class is just being open to experience and being open with your own experience to others. That's if I could ask one thing of each of you, it's just to be genuine, to be yourselves, and be open to the process. So this will be a process. With some of you, it will be more challenging than for others, but I'm hopeful it'll be beneficial for each one of you. So let me go ahead and jump in. First off, I was struck by some of your stories. They touched me on a pretty deep emotional level. Some of the things that you experienced, some of the things that led you to be here in class. And I'm very thankful that each of you chose this path. It's not one that a lot of people choose in our society. Our society is kind of dog eat dog, and everybody look out for themselves and pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of mentality. In fact, unfortunately, in my lifetime, I've seen, over 47 years, have seen more and more people denigrating those who are helping others. And if there's one thing I've learned about this life is that none of us know exactly what the other person has walked through or went through, and that each one of us are in need of help and need of human connection. So I'm hopeful that this will be a good validating, but at the same time very challenging process for you. I'm going to jump through your. Please read through my summary here. I'm going to jump through the outline for week two. I don't want to take too much time because I know everybody's very pressed for time with our busy lives and busy schedules. I really am trying to lay an outline and a foundation for the class in this week's module, in this week's material. And so I'm trying to give you the theoretical foundation for why we do this class and why we do this class like we do. Many of you mentioned the term role play in your opening discussion. And we're not going to do role play. We're going to actually practice counseling. It's not role playing. Role playing is disingenuous. You may feel disingenuous, like you don't know what you're doing, and that's perfectly natural. That's okay, because we learn through the experience. But we should be genuine and open and honest with who we are and what we're doing here. So there won't be any role play in the class. This will be practicing counseling, and you'll practice with each other. If you're getting anxious about, oh my gosh, I don't know about discussing my own stuff, I anticipate putting us in smaller groups. We'll meet as a big group that first week, as for a little while, and split off. But we will be being vulnerable like we were on this first discussion board. Now, I don't expect people to come in, and if you're not fully healed from a trauma or there's something really significant going on currently, that's something that you'll want to make sure that you're receiving help for outside of this class. I'm wanting us to talk about emotional things that are between a 5 and a 7 on an emotional distressing scale. Things start getting up to 8, 9, and 10. That's going to be too much for the context of our class, and I'm going to promote and suggest and strongly recommend you find some outside support for those things, and that's okay. Each one of us, life is full of burdens, and so each one of us go through waves and ebbs and flows of when times are rough and times are better. And one thing that we do know is to be an effective counselor, the times need to be better for us than they are for the other person. because if we're in an emotional crisis, we need to back out and take some space for us to get ourselves in good shape before we can actually be effective and healing for others. So with that said, let's go ahead and look at the outline and overview for this chapter. If you haven't already, reread chapter 1, skim through it. Your assignment will relate to the chapter. The better part of this content for this week, though, is in WAMPOLD 2015. There's an article here. I also have it farther down right here for you to read through. And also Carl Rogers' Necessary and Sufficient Conditions. And I also have that right here. So you'll notice there's quite a time lapse, time frame between WAMPOLD and Rogers. I'll summarize the work of WAMPOLD, and I tried to give it right here in this table and graph. But WAMPOLD, to summarize this research from 2015, actually his original research was published in 2001. And what he did is he tried to go through and find out, and I'm guilty of this. There's been a big push in the field to make practitioners provide evidence-based practice. Now, evidence-based practices are those that are shown by research, controlled trials, to be effective. With the vaccine push that we've got in the country right now, we definitely want evidence that this is safe and it's effective. And so the same sort of rules governed and have governed counseling as well. If insurance is going to reimburse us for the things that we do with people, we want to see and show that they've been effective. And so there's this balance, and I would say that I've gone on either side of the continuum here, and there's a balance somewhere in the middle between like theory, which is just, okay, this is our theoretical underpinnings, what we believe, and this is like our evidence, this is our hardcore evidence, and then hopefully what somebody's thought of abstractly over here, what the theory of helping somebody is, and the nuts and bolts, key specific pieces and components kind of come together to form this theoretical and evidence-based practice model. Now, for those of you that don't know what evidence-based practice is, it's you basically take through, okay, here's 200 clients, and we're going to try this new cognitive behavioral therapy technique with them. And if you're going to do science, you're going to do, evidence-based practice, it has to be what? It has to be valid, which means it has to be repeatable. You have to be able to show that you're doing the same thing with all 200 of these people. It's got to be reliable. It's got to be consistent. And so in doing that, if you're doing the exact same thing with 200 people, what do you see? What do you see as maybe some failures and some faults with that line of thinking? If you said that all people are different, we each have our own cultural backgrounds and our own experiences, and we each have different developmental, maybe stages of our lives. Maybe some of us are younger, some of us are older, and that one size fits all may not fit all. If you had some thoughts like that, you're on the right track. And this is very valid. I was the biggest evidence-based, you've got to use evidence-based practice director when I was at Youth and Family Services, when I was at charge therapist at Meadow Lake. I was really heavily into make sure your practice, between all the therapists counselors that I was supervising, make sure you're doing evidence-based practice. I'm going to say I was wrong. You're like, what? Well, those people, they got reimbursed by insurance. What do you mean? What do you mean you were wrong? I was wrong in that there's not, when people do these one size fit all, it's like you come with a manual and you try to do like step by step, like isn't a manual. There are good things in there and there are useful things in there, but if you don't try to meet your client where they are, all that is lost. When I initially left school, where you all are at now, when I initially left You know, you'd be leaving about a year and a half when you graduate. I was very, I was split between Carl Rogers, unconditional positive regard, client-centered theory, and cognitive behavioral, maybe more in the line of Beck and Ellis. And I really erred more on the side of Carl Rogers, person-centered, because well, first of all, I didn't know what I was doing, right? Because you don't know when you're first out in the field. And I just kind of had a few cognitive behavioral techniques. But second of all, it kind of worked. It did work because I connected with people. And even though I didn't give them maybe all these sophisticated tools that I've gained over the years through all these different trainings I've gone to, I still made a connection with them. And they still improved. And I can tell you that first year I got out in practice, some of the best success stories that I can recall are from that first year and when I didn't know what I was doing. You know, it was basically connecting with someone. And so stripping down all these sophisticated tools, you do this, and this. Most students want those tools when they're here. They're like, give me tools, give me tools, give me tools. These are the best tools I can give you. And this is the research that backs that up. As you can see from the chart below, and so this is Wampold's research. What he tried to do was to go in and look at all of the different, tried to look at psychodynamic, Adlerian, Jungian, CBT, existential, you name it, all these different theories, reality therapy, narrative therapy. You try to look at all these different therapies and tried to find out which is the best one, because that's the one we need to be teaching. We need to be teaching the one that's the most effective with the most people. And so what he found initially, this began in the 80s, was that, well, they're all about similar. You know, they're all kind of like, some of them, like there's a pretty big effect size for each one of them. They each seem to be effective with certain people. And then there's some people that don't appear to respond. And so he's like, well, I can't find one that's necessarily, we went back all the way to the 30s, went back to 37, I believe, and looking through the research, which one's more effective. And so then he started looking at different things and started looking at the things within those studies and what were the commonalities between these different therapies, because no one was standing out heads and tails above another. And what Wampold found was that there were these common factors. There were common factors within each one of these things that span across, that you do in this, and this, that were really driving the change. And so this is really what he found. And so there was a small effect size, or there was a good effect size, you know, for collaboration, goal consensus. So making sure you're on the same page with your counselor. But it wasn't like a massive, like it showed to be predictive, but it wasn't this massive effect size. Okay. It showed to be pretty predictive of success. And then what he found behind that, the next predictive thing besides this, I'm on the same page as my counselor, is empathy and alliance and this close collaborative relationship. And so if you combine these three things together, and positive regard, affirmation, you know, you're not judging your client, and congruence, genuineness in the session, you know, you're congruent with that client's emotion, and you're being genuine with them. You know, you're not reading out of a textbook or a manual, do this, and this. And both of you expect that there's going to be a positive outcome to treatment, and that you adapt your evidence-based practice to the culture. These things are the ones driving the change. And the biggest things driving the change is simply empathy and alliance. This collaboration, this close relationship between the client and the counselor. That's what we're going to work on in this class. And so what he actually gave credence to, what what he tried to find out what's the best model, what he actually gave credence to was Carl Rogers back in 1957. He didn't set out to do that. That wasn't his intention at all. He was trying to find out which is the evidence-based practice that's best and which theory is best. And Rogers, way back in 57, with these 6 conditions, these 6 necessary and sufficient conditions. Now, I will say if you only stick with Rogers your whole career, you're probably missing out. But to start with this class, you're largely going to learn this. For constructive personality change to occur, it is necessary, and this is Wampold's backing this up, that these conditions exist and continue over a period of time. You're in psychological contact, meaning, yeah, you're sharing deep thoughts and feelings. The client is in a state of incongruence. Obviously something's wrong. The second person, the counselor, is congruent and integrated in the relationship. So meaning you are attuned to that person's affect, you're attuned to their mood, you're attuned to what things they're sensitive to, you're attuned to their facial expressions, you're attuned to their body mannerisms, you're attuned to things that are important to them. And the counselor experiences unconditional positive regard. So regardless of whether this person cheated on their spouse and they're completely, beating themselves up for it and they're a bowl of jelly, or whether they're, regardless of what they've done, whether they're, whether they're a Biden supporter and you believe, it's something different than somebody you might think a Biden supporter, or vice versa, you're still experiencing unconditional positive regard and empathy for the client. You're not judging them in any way. And it's tough. This is easier said than done. The therapist experiences an empathic understanding. And so an empathic understanding is that you are experiencing their emotions and their thoughts as if you were them. And as if on a very deep, so your mirror neurons, your connections, like you are almost experiencing those. You know what it's like as if you were them. That's empathy. And then there's a communication to the client from the counselor of this empathic understanding and unconditional positive regard. That's communicated back. And so if these conditions exist, then personality and change, constructive change will follow. So that's what we're talking about here. And that's what we're trying to develop is this empathy. And that's what I'm going to work on with you. And so some of you are going to feel very challenged through this course because I'm going to try to break down mannerisms, behaviors that impede you communicating empathy with someone else, that impede them being able to speak to you. I'm going to really break down comments or reactions, mannerisms that communicate judgment. I'm going to try to help you recognize these things, help you find the self-insight to recognize those yourself, and to modify and work on changing those things. The change will be up to you. I'm there as hopefully somewhat of a mirror to help you find new ways of communicating. That's the foundation for this course. Read through, make sure you do all the activities and get them done this week. Otherwise, please reach out if you have any questions. I look forward to moving on with you. Take care.